I'm going to start this review the way I usually do when I'm looking at a piece of equipment that could change the way you work. I ask whether this machine will actually solve the problems you've been hitting day after day, and if it does, whether it does it without forcing you into a compromise you'll regret. There's a lot of buzz around CNC routers that promise professional-grade speed and 4-axis precision, but the reality in a small shop or a makerspace can be very different. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's walk through what the 10-high 3040 2200W actually brings to the table, where it shines, where it falls short, and who should consider spending their budget on it. First thing most people hesitate about is the 4th axis claim. In theory, a 4th axis lets you rotate the workpiece while the spindle stays still, opening up the ability to mill, drill, or engrave on multiple sides without setting up a new fixture each time. For hobbyists who mostly cut flat panels, that feature can feel like a nice-to-have. For a small business that needs to produce engraved signage or custom cabinet components, the ability to flip a piece after each pass can cut setup time dramatically. In practice, the 10-high's 4th axis module is an add-in that plugs into the main controller and is driven by the same stepper drivers that move the X, Y, and Z axes. The result is a system that feels integrated enough to run a single program, but you'll still need to spend a few minutes teaching the software how the rotation aligns with your design file. If you already use a CAD/CAM workflow that supports 4-axis output, you'll get immediate benefit. If you're new to multi-axis machining, expect a learning curve that's steeper than a basic 3-axis router. The next practical point is the water cooling system. A 2200W spindle can generate a lot of heat, especially when you're cutting hardwood or soft aluminum for a few hours straight. The built-in water cooling loop keeps the spindle temperature down, which translates to more consistent cutting speeds and less chance of the motor winding up. In a review I read from a few other CNC enthusiasts, they warned that many low-cost routers don't even have a cooling fan, let alone a water system, and they end up throttling the spindle after about 15 minutes. With the 10-high, the water block is sealed and comes with a small reservoir and pump. The only downside is that you have to keep an eye on the water level and change it every few months, otherwise you risk corrosion. If you're comfortable with a little routine maintenance, the cooling lets you push the machine harder without overheating, which is a real win for anyone who wants to process thicker material. The USB port is another feature that gets a lot of attention. It isn't just a plug in a flash drive and go solution. The port actually allows the controller to communicate with a PC running the same firmware or with third-party software that can stream code directly to the machine. For users who already have a laptop on the workbench, this means you can skip the separate controller box that some other routers require. The trade-off is that you'll need to install the driver and make sure your PC's power settings don't put the USB into sleep mode mid-cut. In a real-world scenario, I've seen makers set up a tiny Raspberry Pi as a dedicated server, connect it via the USB, and have it pull jobs from a shared folder. If you're comfortable tweaking software, the port is a flexibility boost. Otherwise, you might find yourself looking for a US to serial adapter after a few attempts. Now let's talk about the ball screw drive. The X and Y axes use linear ball screws, which are known for smooth motion and low backlash, essential when you need the router to follow tight curves in a CNC engraved logo or to keep a pocketing pass at a constant depth. In a typical 3-axis router that uses rubber belts, you'll notice a slight wobble when the machine hits high speeds or when you're cutting dense material. The ball screw setup on the 10-high gives you consistent step accuracy, and the feel is that of a higher-end machine you might see in a professional shop. However, the cost of maintaining ball screws, cleaning the nut, replacing the grease, and occasionally adjusting preload adds another layer of upkeep you might not want if you only run the machine a few times a month. When I think about who should actually buy this router, two categories stand out. The first is the small business owner who makes custom parts, laser-engraved signs, or boutique furniture components and needs a machine that can stay up for long runs without overheating. For them, the 2200W spindle, water cooling, and 4-axis capability combine into a workflow that can handle a mixed material palette: MDF, hardwood, acrylic, and even soft metals without constantly swapping out tools or refixturing the workpiece. The second group is the serious hobbyist who has already outgrown a 1 kilowatt bench router and wants to experiment with multi-axis cuts.